Hello all, history buffs and the curious. Today, we take a leap back in time to 16th century England to reveal a side of history that often remains in the shadows. We are talking about one of the most iconic figures of all time, Queen Elizabeth I. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos and leave a like. Now let's start. In the unparalleled magnificence of Queen Elizabeth I and her reign of England, the sovereign emerged not only as a political figure, but as a symbol constructed with meticulous precision, an emblem of power, intellect, and divinity incarnate. Elizabeth was not just a monarch. She was a living myth, an icon constructed from every gesture, every word, every look. Her appearance, her voice, even her most intimate habits were an integral part of the message she intended to convey to subjects and enemies. The image of an inviolable, superhuman, untouchable queen. But beneath the layers of pearls, powder, and brocade, behind the imperturbable mask of power, lived a woman forced to maintain an image as impeccable as it was inhuman. His life was a fragile balance between reality and representation, between body and symbol. And in this game of illusions, his hygienic habits, strange, sometimes disturbing to our eyes, became tools to build and defend the legend. Elizabeth I was a queen who understood, like few others, the power of appearance. Every detail of her appearance was studied to communicate purity, authority, and distance. But maintaining this aura required sacrifices and complex rituals, which also touched the sovereign's body. In an era when water was seen more as a threat than as a source of cleanliness, Elizabeth developed alternative practices to maintain the image of an immaculate queen. Her relationship with cleanliness was not dictated by negligence, but by strategy. Every choice, even the most minute, had a political and symbolic function. Avoiding the bath did not mean ignoring hygiene. It meant protecting her from a reality that could damage her image. To truly understand Elizabeth, it is necessary to analyze not only her policies or her military victories, but the minute and daily details of her behavior. Because it is there, in those personal habits, that the depth of her vision of power is revealed. Among the most curious and revealing practices of the Queen, her addiction to sugar stands out, a rare and very expensive luxury in the 16th century. At a time when sugar consumption was reserved for the richest and most powerful, Elizabeth transformed it into a statement of prestige. It is said that she was particularly fond of candied violets, sugared marzipan, and fruit preserved in syrup. Every bite was an act of ostentation, not just of wealth, but of control over the empire's nascent economy. However, the price paid was high. The Queen's teeth, once white and strong, blackened over time, affected by a lethal combination of sweets and rudimentary dental care. She used a paste made of herbs and sugar to brush her teeth, a naive attempt that contributed to the ruin of her smile. By the end of the century, many ambassadors noted the deterioration of her teeth. Black teeth, foul breath, difficulty speaking. Yet Elizabeth refused any invasive medical intervention. One legend tells of a courtier who had a tooth extracted in front of her to demonstrate that the operation was not too painful. But she remained firm. Even more surprising was the fact that her court imitated her condition. Many ladies began to dye their teeth black to look more like the sovereign. In an almost grotesque reversal of aesthetic canons, decay became fashion. In addition to the dental issue, other hygienic customs completed the portrait of a woman suspended between pomp and fragility. The famous statement attributed to Elizabeth, "I bathe once a month, whether I need it or not," although historically uncertain, accurately expresses the approach of the time to water. Bathing was considered dangerous. It was feared that it could open the pores, weaken the body, and allow impure air to enter. For this reason, Elizabeth preferred to frequently change her underwear in contact with the skin, believing that this was enough to clean the body. She also relied on rituals based on scented vinegars, herbal infusions, and rinses with rosewater. Her ladies applied these essences with care, barely touching the sovereign's skin. It was not just a question of smell, but of a symbolic language. These gestures were an integral part of the construction of the myth of the eternal queen. Every touch, every aroma contributed to consolidating the idea that Elizabeth was superior to the common human destiny. Makeup was another essential tool in her arsenal of control. The Queen's pale face, now as iconic as it is disturbing, was the result of a substance known as Venetian ceruse, a toxic mixture of white lead and vinegar. This compound gave the skin a porcelain-white appearance, but over time it corroded the epidermis, causing sores, scars, and permanent damage. To cover her growing imperfections, Elizabeth had to apply increasingly thick layers, becoming a prisoner of her own image. Her lip color was obtained through cinnabar, a pigment containing mercury, which further aggravated her physical deterioration. Yet the Queen never gave up her routine. She ordered that portraits always show her as young and radiant, banned mirrors from her private apartments, and insisted that she be powdered even when no one was looking. The royal face became a mask, fragile and sacred, a totem of sovereignty that could not be scratched. But perhaps no aspect of court life exemplifies the complex relationship between hygiene, power, and performance like the management of physiological needs. The Queen's palaces, however sumptuous, were completely lacking in modern plumbing. The sovereign's private bathroom consisted of a padded chair with a hole in it, beneath which was placed a chamber pot. This had to be emptied and cleaned several times a day by a trusted official, the Groom of the Stool. Despite his name, he was not a simple servant, but a nobleman with privileged access to the Queen, present in her most intimate moments, sometimes even involved in political matters. Outside the royal chamber, waste management was entrusted to gong farmers, night workers who carried excrement outside the walls to mass graves. The smell, often unbearable, was combated with aromatic herbs spread on the floor or burned. However, the reality remained harsh. Elizabeth's palaces were centers of both pomp and decay. Her frequent movements from one residence to another were dictated not only by strategic reasons, but also by hygiene. The longer the court stayed in one place, the more unhealthy the environment became. Finally, at the heart of all these habits was one fundamental idea: control. Elizabeth's body was not hers. It was an instrument of power, an extension of the monarchy. Her skin, her hair, her breath, even her smell, were elements to be shaped, guarded, protected. She surrounded herself with perfumes, handkerchiefs soaked in essences, perfumed gloves to give to her most trusted courtiers. She did not wash her face often. Doing so would have meant erasing the mask, removing the sacred veil of the image that protected her authority. Even her hair, hidden under perfumed wigs, was treated with harsh substances such as sugar and egg white to keep it in order. When her baldness became evident, Elizabeth chose to wear wigs, styled with extreme care, rejecting the reality that time was trying to impose on her. In her later years, the Queen became increasingly secretive. She banned new portraits, avoided mirrors, and forbade any signs of decadence in her portrayal. Some accounts speak of a lady-in-waiting whose sole function was to touch up the powder on the back of the Queen's neck, so that no part of her body appeared human. Vulnerable, when she walked the palace corridors, she carried a scented stick, which she raised to her nose in moments of olfactory discomfort. A simple gesture, but full of meaning. An affirmation of her status, an invisible barrier between her and the rest of the world. Elizabeth had learned that in her time and in her role, cleanliness was not just a matter of health, but of appearance. And appearance was everything. Queen Elizabeth remains, over the centuries, one of the most fascinating and complex figures in monarchical history. Not because she was free of imperfections, but because she knew how to transform them into instruments of power. Her hygiene habits, however bizarre they may seem today, were an integral part of a sophisticated strategy. In a world where image was synonymous with identity, Elizabeth chose to sacrifice the truth of the body in favor of the eternity of myth. The bath, the perfumes, the cosmetics, the daily rituals, nothing was left to chance. Every detail served to construct the Virgin Queen, the Gloriana, the semi-divine being who would defy time. And therein, perhaps, lies her greatest legacy, in the art, fearsome and fragile, of transforming the human into legend. That's all for today. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next video. Bye.